Hey guys, today we're introducing a new content series called Sage Advice Unfurled as well. So what is Sage Advice and why is it important? Well, Sage Advice is a robust compendium that seeks to clarify rules as written versus rules as intended for some of the most hotly contested 5e rules. It's authored by D&D 5e lead rules designer Jeremy Crawford, and it also includes errata for rules that have changed over time. Often when an official campaign or an official compendium is published, they have changes that come out post-publishing. So those are all represented in Sage Advice as well. It's typically updated every other month as more player and character questions come in through the community so they can answer and address some of those more confusing or more obscure rule states. With today's Sage Advice Unfurled, we're talking about the rule books. So what books are actually considered rule books under 5e? There are actually only 3 books that are considered rule books in 5th edition D&D, and those are the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monstrous Manual. There are also 2 tertiary guidebooks or rule books, including the Adventurer's League Guide and the Standard Rules Definitions. So in today's Sage Advice Unfurled, we're asking the question, well, based on what we've talked about already, what are the official source books and why aren't they rule books? Well, there have been dozens of source books published, like Adventurer's Guide to Wildemount, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Volo's Guide, and Eberron Rising from the Last War. But they're source materials that provide new and exciting options for players and DMs alike, more than rules guides on how the game is played or run. Sometimes these books can, of course, be a combination of both, and they introduce campaign settings and rules at the same time, like Eberron Rising from the Last War, including adventures, campaign, lore, and new player and DM options. So in today's Sage Advice Unfurled, we talk about errata a little bit. We've heard of it. You might know about it. And errata is usually published to correct oversights or changes in the rules or source compendiums after they're published. To err is human, obviously. So errata is designed to make changes after these resources have hit the market. Think of them as like a patch or an update to a published material. Now, there have been a number of errata published, particularly for 5e, that can significantly change how you play either a campaign or use a resource compendium like Xanathar's Guide to Everything or Tyranny of Dragons. So make sure you take a look and see what was published after the material you bought, because it might have significant ramifications for how you run the game and how it affects your players. Continuing with Sage Advice Unfurled today, we're talking about the official source books that are currently available for Dungeons & Dragons, and what are they? So, fun fact, the first basic rules in the D&D 5e starter kit came out full 2 months before the Player's Handbook was even released. From there, let's talk about the official rule books. They are the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monstrous Manual. The 2 tertiary ones to that are the Free Basic Rules and the Adventurer's League Player's Guide. The only official source books that have been released so far are Elemental Evil, Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, and the campaign setting for the Sword Coast loosely, Volo's Guide to Monsters, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. The official adventures that have been published for 5e include Lost Mine of Phandelver, that came with the starter kit, Tyranny of Dragons, Princes of the Apocalypse, Out of the Abyss, Curse of Strahd and the campaign setting of Barovia, Storm King's Thunder, Tales from the Yawning Portal, Tomb of Annihilation, the campaign setting of Chult, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, The Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, which is also a campaign setting in Magic the Gathering, Ghosts of Saltmarsh, which is loosely ripped from the Greyhawk setting, Acquisitions Incorporated, Dragon of Icespire Peak, which is the new Essentials Kit campaign, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus, Eberron Rising from the Last War, which is the campaign setting of Corvair, The Explorer's Guide to Wildemount in the campaign setting of Wildemount, and the upcoming Mythic Odysseys of Theros.